Hello, everybody, and welcome back for another edition of Ukraine This Week with me, Don Arleth. A fast-tracked U.S. peace deadline could force a breakthrough in the Russia-Ukraine war with presidential elections and a referendum on territorial concessions in Kyiv as early as May 15th. If that happens, Ukraine wants its EU path accelerated too. In Brussels, the European Commission is weighing a plan to bring Ukraine into the bloc by 2027 under a streamlined membership light model. But with Moscow resisting meaningful concessions, hopes are high, but expectations are low. All signs point to 2026 as a pivotal year. Russia's economy is faltering, battlefield gains have stalled, and the invasion has delivered diminishing returns. Moscow has suffered roughly 1.2 million casualties for just 8% of Ukrainian territory since 2022. More shockingly, 850,000 of them over the past 2 years yielded just 1.5% of Ukrainian territory. That's why sustained military backing is critical now. At this week's Ukraine Defense Contact Group meeting, allies pledged $35 billion in new assistance. Support, Kyiv says, is essential to raising Russian losses from 35,000 to 50,000 per month, according to Ukraine's defense minister. Now let's take a look at this report from Ukraine This Week. Another tough week for Ukrainians. As Kyiv continues to push for peace, Moscow continues to terrorize civilians. Nearly all regions of Ukraine came under fire this week, with dozens killed, including children. Russia maintains its campaign to destroy Ukraine's energy facilities, leaving authorities with no chance to restore the damaged infrastructure.
I just want to cry, nothing else, especially since some of the equipment had already been repaired and put back into operation, and the work that had been done is now being redone.
On Thursday, some 300,000 people were left without electricity and water in Odessa alone, while in the capital of Kyiv, more than 2,000 households remained unplugged from the power. With no signs of progress in the peace talks and the situation growing increasingly dire, many people are considering leaving the country.
We understand that the war will not end, so we think that closer to next winter, we will probably move somewhere else.
As talks between Moscow and Kyiv have reached a deadlock and fighting continues along the front line, Ukraine is stepping up its presence on the international stage, calling on partners to provide more support for Kyiv. And there was some positive news. Ukraine's defense minister, Mikhailo Fedorov, announced that Kyiv has secured nearly $35 billion in military assistance following the Ukraine contact meeting in Ramstein.
The decisions that are made here are important. They designate the protection and security of Ukrainian cities, the survivability of the civilian population, and peace. And we should be flexible, creative, technological, and resilient.
At the meeting, 17 countries, including the UK, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Canada, and Belgium, pledged additional financial and military assistance to Ukraine.
I announced a new £500 million package of urgent air defence support for Ukraine, President Zelensky's top priority.
Germany is going to deliver 5 additional interceptor missiles called PAC-3 to Ukraine if other supporting countries donate a total of 30 PAC-3.
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte urged allies to provide even more support.
We must also support the vision of Minister Fedorov when it comes to 2026 and to make Ukraine as strong as possible in the fight. And I'm urging all nations to step up their support and to share that burden.
There was also positive news from the European Parliament headquarters.
And it is adopted largely.
The European Parliament finally greenlit a $90 billion loan for Ukraine, approved by the European Council in December, after it had failed to agree on using frozen Russian assets. The funds will secure a large chunk of the country's budgetary and military needs for the next 2 years. With this support, Ukraine is heading into the 4th round of U.S.-led peace talks with Russia.
The team has been formed taking into account the military, political, and security components of the process. We will work on substantive decisions within the framework defined by the head of state. The goal remains unchanged: a sustainable and lasting peace. We are preparing for serious and responsible work.
The next round of trilateral negotiations between Ukraine, the United States, and Russia is scheduled to take place in Geneva on February 17th and 18th. $35 billion in further military assistance for Kyiv is a lot of money desperately needed this year to help end the war. And now joining me to discuss whether the Ministry of Defense will spend this money wisely and what concerns anti-corruption institutions are watching out for is Olena Tregub, and she's the Secretary General of NAKO, the Independent Anti-Corruption Commission. Hello, Olena, and thank you so much for joining us on Ukraine This Week.
Yes, thank you for inviting me. Hello.
Yes, now let's start off with some of the problems that the Ministry of Defense has faced in terms of corruption since the full-scale invasion. What were they and how have they been addressed?
Well, essentially, the biggest problem was that when the invasion happened, Ukraine wasn't fully prepared for this kind of invasion, and Ukraine didn't have enough weapon, enough non-lethal supply for the kind of war that Ukraine faced. And because of that, of course, Ukraine immediately started organizing urgent procurements. Ukraine immediately classified all procurements for the first 6 months of invasion. And so, yeah, those were problems because money was flowing and there were a lot of overpayments because there was scarcity of weapons, of ammunition, and there was no transparency at that time and no oversight. However, right now the situation has changed completely because we're now 4 years into the full-scale war. And Ukraine managed to build the whole procurement infrastructure, which is very much in line with what NATO countries have. Now Ukraine has a separate procurement agency that works under the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. This agency has the independent supervisory board. This agency has a lot of kinds of different audits, a lot of different processes. When it comes to non-lethal procurement, the agency buys from posting everything online on our Ukrainian platform called Prozoro, where journalists, auditors, anybody, they can all see what is being bought at what price. And can analyze those procurements. Doesn't matter that corruption is not happening there, but it's all transparent and it can be stopped quickly if there are some things happening. And then when it comes to lethal procurements, they are also developing internal mechanisms in order to have control there, even though those procurements, of course, they remain classified. So overall, I would say Ukraine is much in better shape right now than it used to be before the full-scale war.
Yeah, so it's become much more transparent and the information is out there for everybody to see. You know, we've also heard that there's a lot of problems or potential problems of the frontline units getting the weapons and equipment that they so desire, so need. Some units and divisions have been prioritized over others. Is that still an issue, and is that something that the new Minister of Defense is working on?
Well, yes, that's an issue because, of course, obviously, Ukraine never faced a situation when there will be so many units fighting and everybody will need things urgently because the front line is huge with Russia. And this is why we needed to set up a completely different system of logistics command than we had before the full-scale war. And that new system should be more in line with NATO standards. And this has been done. This has been improved. And I know that there were a lot of advisors from NATO countries working on this. to improve the system. It's still work in progress. However, there were also additional mechanisms introduced to fill the gaps. If the system is failing, for example, and we have a brigade that needs something urgently, but they cannot receive this thing through the centralized procurement, then they have their own money, their own budget, and they can go to the Ukrainian marketplace, which was launched last year, which is called .chain defense. It's like a Ukrainian Amazon for military products, for weapons. They can order, the commanders can order, and it can be delivered to them quickly, and they already ordered 200,000 items on this platform. And additionally, there are also budgets of the local authorities, which can be also used towards procurement of something urgent, where centralized system is not capable to supply. So it's a multi-layered system right now. And still, unfortunately, there are some gaps that Ukrainian charity foundations like Come Back Alive or Prytula Foundation or Sternenko Fund are filling, because this, if everything was so perfect, then those private charities probably wouldn't exist. But it is still not as, critical as it used to be. It's getting better year after year as Ukraine is learning how to, sustain such a massive military operation.
Yeah. Well, we've seen Ukraine developing some very innovative solutions which have proved to be low cost and very highly effective. Let's take drones, for instance. Now Europeans are barking at the door for this, for the drones, for the technology, for the experience that the Ukrainians have. What are some of the concerns in terms of joint production abroad, and even the sales of domestically produced drones to other European nations that you guys are looking at?
Well, the main concern is, of course, lack of funding. Everybody speaks about lack of funding. Everybody speaks about the fact that Ukraine capacity to make weapons is only filled up to 50%. Ukraine can make much more, around 35 billion euro market. That's the estimate. But Europeans are not really investing those amounts in Ukraine yet. And the concern is that Ukraine needs to scale up. Ukraine needs to produce many more drones, many more electronic warfare systems than we currently are doing, because the innovation in Ukraine is incredible. It's the most innovative country currently in Europe when it comes to defense technology. And we have new companies. We have 700 private producers right now who emerged, but they are all smaller in terms of their scope. And this is why this hope that Europe would completely satisfy Ukrainian need for the financing has not materialized yet. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, another concern is that there is certain tendency that sometimes we see when some countries are just trying, or some groups or some companies are just trying to take out Ukrainian expertise, Ukrainian knowledge, without actually helping Ukraine, but taking this knowledge and expertise in order to make their own weapon in their own country. And even sometimes headhunting Ukrainian engineers. So this is something which should not be happening, because Ukraine is in the middle of a hot war, and whoever comes to Ukraine and suggests that they want to cooperate in defense industry, they should understand that they have, I would say, like moral obligation to contribute to Ukraine winning the war, because all this new innovation, all these incredible drones and electronic warfare and Delta system, all those things, they were developed because Ukrainians lost lives. Ukrainians paid with their blood, with their young people for those kind of weapons and developments. So that's why I think Europeans or any partners who cooperate with Ukraine, they should never forget about it.
Now, have the policies been developed? I mean, I absolutely agree with you. Have there been policies developed, though, within the Ministry of Defense that kind of governs this whole process? You know, if we look at our own military-industrial complex in the West, you know, you can look from the United States or even to Europe, it seems we spend a lot of money on development, on research and development, and then, of course, we spend a lot of money on these systems that I'll just give you one example, the Switchblade, right? This is an astronomical cost for something that Ukraine has already solved with a low-cost solution. So are there policies in place, I guess is what I'm getting at, that govern this whole process so that, A, you're not buying overpriced stuff from the West, and B, that your knowledge and know-how isn't going to the West for free?
Well, yes, those policies are being developed right now. It's still very early stage. I want to remind your viewers that Ukraine has opened up their export of weapons only essentially in February this month. And Ukraine is now establishing offices, one in Germany, one in Denmark, so that we will have some selected Ukrainian companies who will be allowed by Ukrainian government to start exporting their drones and other kind of weapons, mostly drones, to European countries and share the technology and have the joint production and doing all those kind of cooperation projects. But in general, right now it's just the beginning, and in general, we do not see the integration of Ukrainian defense industry sector into the, for example, European defense industry or into the American defense industry, just because those industries, they are very different. They have been established a long time ago. They produce very different kind of weapon. Their structure of their pricing is very different. Those weapons usually are much more expensive, whereas Ukrainian weapons are much, much cheaper, and they are very lean in terms of the whole company structure that Ukrainians have. And this is why it's a disruptor. It's something that probably wouldn't benefit a lot of those companies that are very big and have very big expensive contracts and very, very big bonuses and very huge salaries. Even I heard how American official Scott Bassett, even he was criticizing at the Davos Forum recently that American big defense contractors, that they are taking huge money from the government, but they are delaying the production of weapon. And I think this is also the effect of Ukrainian example, because they saw how things can be fast, they saw how things can be less expensive. And I think it's important to merge this Ukrainian experience with defense capability of the West, of Europe. And this is still happening, but it's pretty slow. Because we now all discussing the article of the Wall Street Journal that revealed the recent exercise that NATO had with Ukrainians in Estonia. The Hedgehog exercises, where actually it became clear that 10 Ukrainian drone operators, they were able to destroy a lot of European NATO weapon target soldiers within basically hours. And it showed that actually Europe is not ready for the modern warfare that currently Russia and Ukraine are waging.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's exactly what I wanted to bring up, and it proves a really, really important point. You know, there's a huge debate right now in Poland about the SAFE funds, these low-interest loans to go ahead and procure around 48 billion euros in equipment. And they want to use this money very, very quickly. But I would argue that what you just said proves the point that there might be another way to go about doing this and procuring the right systems at the right cost, but that would take some time, to sit down and really think about it, and actually to pick the experience of the Ukrainians. So again, do you think that the Ukrainians are going to play a bigger role in this process in Europe as we're going to see hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars spent in defense over the next few years?
Well, yes, I think it's Ukrainians, they should explain, they should convince European governments that they need their solutions, their military products, because sometimes from what I observed, I also, as a Ukrainian, I'm traveling to different European countries, meet different ministries of defense. I noticed that sometimes even government officials who work in defense sector, even some who work, for example, in departments for defense innovation, they don't understand what weapons their country needs. And they would ask sometimes questions that would show that they are probably like 1 year behind or even more, because they are watching Ukrainian situation on the ground, on the battlefield, but they are watching it from afar. They are not really traveling, they are not really participating anyhow on the ground. And this is why it's very easy for them to procure something which is being offered by their local companies without critical thinking that this is something which is from the war in the past, but the new war has changed, and they didn't fully grasp that the new war is or about drones, about electronic warfare. Like, for example, one example is that we were in one of the countries, and they were asking us that their country is now making their version of Bayraktar. It's a big Turkish drone, as you remember. But we explained to them, look, Bayraktar is not used anymore because it was effective at the beginning of the war. But right now, Russia learned how to suppress it immediately. So this is the past right now. And you, when you prepare for your potential defense, for your war, your most likely attacker would be Russia. And therefore, probably that's not a good idea for you to build your version of Bayraktar. But this work has to be done, and this explanation, in my opinion, is not probably done enough in the European capitals.
Yes, for sure. And it seems like Ukraine has a good hold of this. And an example are the recent Polish MiGs being offered to President Zelensky in exchange for these drones, right? And Zelensky's saying, well, you know what, that's not really at the top of our priority list. There are other things that are more important to us in terms of aid if we're going to have to pretty much pony up and pay for it. So is Ukraine, do you think, becoming more selective in what it takes from the West? And I would imagine there's also some corruption coming from the West in giving Ukraine systems it doesn't even need.
Yeah, of course. Right now, Ukraine has much better understanding what Ukraine needs, what works, what doesn't work. At the beginning of the war, it was chaos, it was panic, it was lack of understanding, and different things were tested. And you know that there were some systems tested, developed by US company, for example, where then Ukrainians calculated that the rate at which that particular missile was able to hit the target was 19%. 19%, and that was a very expensive missile. And right now, because there is a lot of analysis done of each particular weapon, right now there is clarity what is needed. We need systems that would protect us from ballistic attacks, such as Patriot, obviously. Then in terms of other protections, we're now building this small air defense shield to protect us from drones. We are developing drones with artificial intelligence to intercept Russian Shahed drones and developing other similar systems. So it's now more clear, definitely, what we need, and it's much more difficult now for partners to give to us something that we don't need, because especially when it came to American assistance, America was the biggest contributor to Ukrainian defense assistance at the beginning of the full-scale war, obviously, and because of that, in those huge packages, sometimes they would pack a weapon which would be very expensive, but which wouldn't work in Ukraine. So stuff like that doesn't really happen anymore, from what I can see, because right now we are, Ukraine basically asks for concrete weapons, and Europeans are helping and buying the weapons for us that we need. But the problem here is that now the scale of this assistance has become smaller. And this is why, for example, this winter, our government was saying that we need more air defense systems, because Russia is destroying our energy infrastructure.
Right, and unfortunately, those missiles are very expensive, but they're desperately needed. I guess on a positive note, at least, at the contact group meeting, $35 billion been approved for additional military assistance. So let's hope that that can put Ukraine in a position of strength as it tries to negotiate the end of the war. Olena Tregub, thank you so much for joining us on Ukraine this week. We very much appreciate it and your insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now joining us from the Munich Security Conference is Yevheniia Kravchuk, Deputy Chair of the Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy in the Ukrainian Parliament. Hello, Yevheniia, and thank you so much for joining us on Ukraine this week.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, so you're at the Munich Security Conference. We hear a lot of talk of the old world order ending and a new world order beginning. How do you think that this will affect Ukraine?
Well, it already affected, because actually the old world order was gone in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea. Let's face it, it hasn't been working until now. So we had some problems with some countries, naming Russia, during aggression, and before that, attacking Georgia, and people and countries and political leaders would be closing their eyes to this aggression. So here we are in 2026, thinking how to live together with the aggression, and that this aggression can affect other countries, obviously. And there is hybrid aggression against many European countries coming from Russian Federation itself. So basically, I think it's also a question to Europe, not just European Union, but I think Europe as the continent, whether they united all of the countries together with Ukraine, and I mean that Ukraine inside of this perimeter can be a superpower, because everyone is talking what United States do. Everyone is looking on China and what China does. But again, Chancellor Merz rightfully mentioned that European Union, just European Union's GDP, economic power, is 10 times bigger than Russia. And still, in 4 years of full-scale aggression, we haven't pushed Russia strong enough to have this aggression, to end this aggression, because it would be too costly. But there is the great damage to economy. We see that it's in bad shape in Russia, but also Ukraine that was about to fall, as many intelligence services said, in 2022, now here to Munich brings new drones and brings new technologies. We have just Ukrainian house a few hundred meters away, and we have Ukrainian-made weapons there displayed as something that is the essence of the warfare of the 21st century, and we're ready to share this expertise.
Yes, and I hope the Europeans are interested in that expertise, because I think it can provide cost effectiveness and actually be the right equipment for the right time against the right enemy, which would be Russia. that the Europeans are looking at. Well, overall, at the Munich Security Conference, how do you feel the focus on Ukraine? Do you think that Ukraine is getting the spotlight that it needs at this point, especially with Donald Trump trying to push deadlines for a peace agreement?
Well, I can compare to a few previous conferences, and I think that Ukraine is even in the bigger spotlight this year. With a separate, house, as there is American House, German House. Of course, the speech of President Zelensky is very much awaited, and it's going to happen tomorrow. He already arrived today to the conference for the bilaterals, and also I think a lot of people will come to listen to Marco Rubio, the chair of American delegation this year. And of course, we understand that the negotiations will be continued, and we're waiting for another round in Geneva. But again, the war doesn't end not because Ukraine doesn't want to. Ukraine wants to, but aggressor doesn't want to. So we have to make sure that aggressor is, reasonable. If not being reasonable, not being constructive, then there had to be bigger pressure, sanctions, bigger deterrence weapons for Ukraine to make, stronger attacks again on the Russian territories, because Ukrainian way of sanctions is the long-range weapons, the long-range missiles and drones, deep strike drones that take out for example, Russian oil refineries.
And of course, I believe that the Ukrainian sanctions are the most effective sanctions that we've seen thus yet. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Yevheniia Kravchuk, Deputy Chair at the Committee on Humanitarian and Information Policy in the Ukrainian Parliament. Thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all the time we have on this edition of Ukraine This Week. Join us again next week for all the latest from the war in Ukraine. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you then. Goodbye.